Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Shang, where we bring in a thought leader in their respective space and they share with us best practices, what's going on in their industry, past, present, and future. And today I'm excited to have Kelsie Marks, who's the Director of Resume Services at Educated Exit. Please tell us a little bit about what Educated Exit is and what you guys do and who makes a good client for you guys.
First of all, thank you so much, Chris, for having me on. Like I said, I am the Director of Resume Services at Educated Exit, and we are a career transitioning firm for educators. We work with everyone from, your classroom teachers, special education teachers, all the way up to school psychologists, school counselors, speech pathologists, assistant principals, superintendents, everyone really across the education spectrum. And our ideal client would be an individual who is really ready to take that next step in their career. They've maybe done a little bit of exploration on their own, and they're really ready for that one-to-one coaching to take them to that next level.
Got it. And to be clear, what does the next level look like? Does this mean that they're moving up, or are there a few different, I guess, like variations of what that means?
Yeah, so we have worked with everyone, like I said, from teachers to school counselors and across the education spectrum. And it really comes down to what they personally want with their career. So we've worked with teachers who just wanted to move up to school counselor or assistant principal. And I've worked with teachers who wanted to just completely exit the profession entirely. I would say that's kind of like our bread and butter is people who want completely out of the education system. And right now, those educators are transitioning into a wide range of positions across the corporate spectrum.
Interesting. I have a lot of questions and a lot of interesting anecdotes I'd like to kind of dive into. But before we do that, how did you end up in this space? I know you have, a variety of background, starting off in also education yourself, uh,
Mhm.
but then going from that to then specializing in what you guys specialize in now. What did that journey look like for you?
Sure. So I started my career fresh out of college. I was a preschool teacher for 2.5 years. I was in the classroom. Absolutely loved it. But if you spend, 8 hours a day with preschool kids, you start to realize some things about yourself and your career. And while I have the utmost respect for individuals who are still preschool teachers, I quickly learned that after about 2.5 years, um, while I still wanted to work in education, I needed something more. I wanted some more career growth. I wanted, some deeper conversations. And for me, that looked like going back to school and getting a master's in education and becoming a school counselor. From there, I worked at the high school and college level and loved it. But if you're kind of in the know about the education system, there are a variety of issues facing educators right now, and many of which we don't have control over. So those high levels of burnout, those feelings of not being able to truly impact students the way that I wanted to are ultimately what led me to leave the profession. And I left the profession in order to go work in the ed tech space, which is very common among educators.
Got it. Got it. And then yeah, I know you had a little bit of a work break from there to then going into educated exit.
Mhm.
Um, Walk us through what that was like, because it seems like you got a little bit outside of like the education space work experience.
Mhm.
And then you ended up going, I guess, like back into ed tech or going into ed tech where it was kind of more of like this direct hybrid of almost like working with people that it seems like that were directly facing the same challenges that you were.
Yes, so that's something that no one has actually ever really pointed out on a podcast is that when you're kind of on the other side and you're working in ed tech, you do see those challenges that other educators are faced with, and you kind of really identify with that. And while I wanted to do everything I could to help those educators, my hands were bound in terms of exactly what that looked like.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, I'm not the one making those decisions on campus. I can only do so much from my back end. And I I have the utmost respect for the organization I worked for. I have the utmost respect for the people that I worked with and the educators I was able to impact. Um, but at the end of the day, what I talk a lot about with our clients is when you leave the education system, you're likely going to face an identity crisis.
Mm,
And for me, that happened a little later on, I think because I didn't really want to face that first thing when I was exiting the profession. But that identity crisis can play a huge part in what you ultimately transition into after education.
got it. Um, I mean, I'd like to kind of stay there for a second in terms of that identity crisis, because I do feel like the personality types or the types of individuals that choose to go into education, right? It's not necessarily for the money. And so it's got to be some other intrinsic motivator. What does that typically look like for you? And because I don't want to speak on it because it's not my area of expertise, but what do you typically see in terms of like the types of personalities that enter that field? And maybe what are their expectations before they kind of like have spent 5, 10, 15 perhaps years in it? And what are they hoping to gain out of it? And maybe, even just speaking from your own personal experience of what you were expecting, what you were hoping.
Well, I know when I first went into the education profession, I was sold kind of this dream profession where you only work from August to June or August to May, and you're there 7 to 3, and it's a great profession if you want to be a parent. And the reality of that is not there anymore.
Mm,
Pensions are being
mm,
whittled down. Um, Curriculum is being assigned, and the level of work that's expected out of an educator is not 7 to 3 anymore. It's more of a 24/7 job.
mm,
And um, it's not that the work is no longer fulfilling, it's that educators don't have the control
yeah,
or the autonomy
yeah,
to be the professional that they were trained to be. And for me personally, I went into the education profession really hoping to impact students in a positive way. And I wanted to be, the person that helped them raise their grades, the person that helped them figure out their path to either college or career or whatever it may be after high school. But the reality is that there are so many factors in a student's life that you don't control. And while you can absolutely be a positive influence on that student's life, at the end of the day, there are so many factors that you kind of have to be okay with just being one of those factors.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I'd be curious to kind of pick your brain on this too, which is, um, what are some of the soft skills that you feel like a lot of educators have that can carry over? Because I know you mentioned the bread and butter is helping a lot of these educators transition to basically an entirely new career, and a lot of it
Mhm.
being into corporate. Um, what are some of the roles within corporate that you've seen the most success with, and why do you think that is based on maybe the personality types of educators and again, those soft skills that they have that you can't necessarily train or coach on?
Yeah, I think that when you look at the education profession as a whole, right, there are a variety of soft skills that make educators successful in the
Yep.
profession. Everything from like active listening to project management to timely communication, all of which serve great purposes in the corporate world. And for us, there are about 5 or 6 industries that are popular with educators that want to leave the profession. But I always tell people that that's not everything. I've had educators who went into like fertility coordination at a doctor's office. I've had people transition into kind of that the corporate side of real estate and development. I've helped educators transition into things like freelancing and starting a business. So there's really a wide range of skills, but ultimately it kind of comes down to that person and what are their professional strengths and weaknesses.
Got it. I'm curious, what are some of the common ones that you're alluding to there? Because I'm interested because I think like And the reason why I bring this up is because I worked in entertainment for a long
Mhm,
time, like 7 or 8 years. And I feel like the soft skills of people who work in entertainment is like you're creative, you figure out how to sell things, because you're selling yourself or an idea,
mhm,
and you're curating that idea and pitch for the audience, whoever is receiving it. It's the same story, same narrative, but the way that you pitch is going to be different. And so you learn very quickly how to change things
mhm,
based on who you're talking to.
mhm,
And I
mhm,
think that's a lot of great soft skills that ends up yielding well for entrepreneurship
mhm,
or working within like a earlier organization or startup, because you are
mhm.
failing a lot, you're learning how to sell things. Unfortunately, I think like sometimes, you're betting on the wrong horse, which is yourself, and that's a big ego pill to swallow. So that's where I think of it, is like I've seen a lot of other entrepreneurs that have come from entertainment and that have been largely successful because of some of those inherent soft skills that help them pursue that career in the first place. I'm just wondering if there's any similarities that you've seen that like does carry over from education to some particular industry well.
So one of the biggest things I would say is the ability to communicate with people.
Hmm.
Um, I get a lot of people who want to do project management, customer success, program management, and like training and onboarding, all of which you really have to be good with people, right? Like you have to be able to communicate effectively. You can't be afraid of public speaking. You have to, be able to build manuals and demonstrate things, all of which many educators
Hmm.
learned to become a teacher. And those tangible skills are invaluable in other places because ultimately, you can hire many people to do some of these jobs. But
Yeah.
if they're not showing up with the right personality and they're scared to get up and present or, whatever it may be, that could impact your team later on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's and nowadays, especially, I think it's more so, and this has probably been true more of like the past five plus years, but or more like within the past 5 years, is that I think people are more testing or looking or identifying, especially from the corporate perspective, or
Mhm,
even like mid-sized companies are looking more for those soft skills, because they're realizing that a classroom can't teach you, or like the text cannot teach you some of those things that help those interpersonal relationships with an organization and ultimately impact the culture of an organization, which has become increasingly more important.
mhm, mhm, absolutely.
I'm curious around how does it work when an educator comes to you and is like, hey, I want to switch careers? Is this like, and I know, I'm sure you're assessing and analyzing again like their individual strengths and weaknesses and the whole nine, but a lot of it to me is probably like also storytelling. Like how do you help them come up with the narrative of how they're going to go into an interview and something that they have no probably like former experience in, and leveraging their existing skill set to make an impact in that room with somebody. Um, what are the steps? What are kind of like, and it doesn't have to be specific, in terms of like a certain use case, but like I'm sure there's a process in terms of how you guys structure this in terms of helping somebody along those routes.
Yes, so we follow a very structured plan and a very structured path. Chris McLean is our CEO and he's our lead career coach. He is phenomenal. He really, well, I should say together, we really build up the career transition process. Everything from like day one, square one, don't know which way is up, all the way through interviewing and offer acceptance. And all of our educators go through a 5 phase like career transition process, which I have personally also gone through and verified. And it's really, like I said, like phase one is don't know which way is up, which way is down. We're assessing your values, understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are, what you want in your next career. High level phase two is, that resume, cover letter, LinkedIn. And then we teach strategic networking and using sales processes to effectively network outside of the education bubble, if you could say. And then from there, we go to interviewing and understanding offer negotiation. So
Mm,
it's really, like I said, it's a very gradual building block process.
got it. Um, and are they going through and building out their own network and building out those relationships to find those opportunities on their own, and you're coaching them along the way?
Yes, so
Okay.
we provide the training and really it's up to them to implement the training.
Mhm.
We recommend to our clients to spend anywhere from like 6 to 10 hours a week implementing the things they talk about during these career coaching calls. And then a career coaching call is anywhere from like an hour to an hour and a half. So it's not a small time commitment. Um, but if you're ready to leave education, that's kind of the commitment that you need to be ready to make.
Yeah. So you're seeing people kind of like in these situations where it's kind of like back against the wall. They are ready to make a change. And so they are fully committed to making that change.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, right now, with all the changes that are happening in education across the country, on any given day, we get anywhere from like 100 to 300 inbound leads of
Well,
people wanting to leave education.
wow, that's crazy. Oh, I mean, like any company that I've worked with in the past, that would be like a great number to be seeing in terms of like inbound leads. Is that always been the case, or is that something you're seeing
Absolutely.
more recently? It's always
Yeah.
been. Okay.
I mean, pretty much since day one. Well, I should from day one, we've always had a very high interest in what we do.
Hmm.
Um, and with recent changes in education systems and funding and things like that, the need has grown much more. But what we also see is social media playing an important role in this because teachers are flocking to social media platforms and they're voicing their concerns, they're voicing their
Hmm.
frustrations, but they're also leaving and they're also saying why they are leaving. So my experience is not unique to me, Kelsie, the school counselor in
Okay.
California. My experience as a school counselor is probably universal on some level of school counselors across the nation feeling high levels of burnout and not being able to impact students the way we kind of were sold the dream in graduate school.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean the levels of which people reach out to us have always been incredibly high.
Got it. And you're saying with like the impact of social media, I think maybe like educating others so that they're not feeling so siloed or isolated in that experience has helped them bring it a little bit more attention to the matter, and feel more confident to kind of openly talk about it and then ultimately make a change.
Yes, absolutely. When I first left the profession or wanted to leave the profession in 2019, I did not know there were people like me
Yeah.
out there. I really thought that this is what being a school counselor was, and you kind of just sucked it up and you made it to retirement because you were in it for the pension and the health care.
Mm.
And this is what you signed up for. You wanted to impact students, and that's the price that you pay for it. But with the rise of social media, like we talked about, that this is not how educators should be treated. This is exploitation on some level.
Yeah. Got it. Um, and so with these, with this amount of interest, I mean, how do you guys, I mean, do you work with everybody, or what's kind of the, is there prerequisites in that process? How do you kind of screen out those that are maybe like tourists of exploring it versus those that are sincerely like, again, I mean, ready to make that commitment?
So our packages are priced pretty competitively in the
Got it.
market. We tell people like, we are not just a warm hug. If you want just a warm hug and water cooler complaining, there are other coaches for that, and they do a very good job at that. We are here specifically to make a plan and help you leave. And some people get kind of scared at that, right? Like they're like, oh, maybe I just need that water cooler complaining. But ultimately, it comes down to two things: the price of our services and people who are ready to take action, because I'm not shy on social media to say, like, you're going to work hard for this and you need to be ready to work hard for this.
Mhm.
So if you're not willing to put in that work, then maybe right now is not the best time.
Yeah. So interesting. I think about it, and I've worked with companies in the ed tech space and other educators that came from, like, yeah, working in the preschool system or early education, and then going uh into ed tech because of that fact of it being very, very challenging. My question next is kind of stemmed around, how do you help? I mean, I think it's one thing, obviously, you cannot help them make the decision to get to a place where, they are ready to make a big change. But I
Mhm.
would imagine it's a big change regardless. And for anybody to make a big change, it's a scary thing. Even if you're ready, even if you're desperate, even if you have a sense of urgency. Um, how do you guys walk through that? Because I would imagine every case is a little bit different. I'm sure some are a little bit more thicker skinned and ready to go gung ho at it, and then others are probably a little bit more timid in the experience, but still have that urgency and drive to make it through. How do you walk them through that in a case by case basis?
So for me personally, I just share my own personal experience. Like, I was at a place where I was so burnt out. I was gaining weight. I wasn't sleeping. I was crying almost every day. And I just knew, like, I could not do this forever. I didn't know what my plan was, but I knew I had to leave. And oh, for a lot of people that resonates with them. And
Totally.
they say things like, yeah, that's where I'm at right now. Or they say things like, I'm not fully at that level, but I know that I cannot stay here for another 5 years.
Mm,
And a lot of times people kind of fall into one or two, sometimes three categories, where it's like the people who are ready to leave and have their backs up against the wall and say, like, I'm ready, help me get there. And then the second bucket is somewhat more or less, I should say, common, but people who know they want to leave education but are not sure of their timeline.
yeah.
And to those people, I generally say, like, it takes anywhere with us from 3 to 6 months to leave. So you kind of need to think about, where do you want to be 6 months from now? So
Hmm.
you may not feel the urgency now, but 6 months from now, will you feel that urgency? And then kind of our third and smallest bucket is people who are just, like you said, there for the touristic aspect. They want to check it out, they want to know what their options are. Absolutely, they're more than welcome here. But they're not on any kind of urgency timeline. They just know at some point they should probably have an exit plan.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, I'm so curious. How did the CEO start this business, and how did, yeah, he end up, I guess, creating process and structure around something that maybe was a firsthand experience?
So Chris and I first started working together in, I believe, 2021. And I met him networking on LinkedIn, um, using all of LinkedIn's features, posting, commenting, things like that. And he started coaching me first and helping me kind of navigate the career transition process. Because, like I said, after leaving ed tech, or while I was in ed tech, I had gone through a little bit of an identity crisis. And during that time frame, I had moved across the country. I got married. I traveled. I had a lot of things going on. And so I was at a place where I was ready to get back in the workforce. And that's when I met Chris. And through just some of our conversations, uh, coaching calls, networking strategy sessions, he really approached me and said, I think you're selling yourself short if you just go and work for an ed tech company, or just go back and kind of pursue this education adjacent type of career. And he was really kind of the thought leader behind it, of like, why don't we team up
Mm,
and really implement a structure in which we can help others. Um, and I was a little scared. I had come from a space where I was really kind of more or less being told what to do, to a place of like, okay, like we're going to build this thing together, and we together do all of these things and implement strategies. And um, I had a big voice and a big say, and it was a huge career move for me. And I will say it's, probably one of the biggest learning experiences of my life is to start a business with a mentor. And um, business is not for the faint of heart, especially if you start from ground zero. But you will learn a lot and you will grow a lot.
That's for sure. Yeah, I mean, I would think that, educators aren't necessarily the most risk averse people out there. And so making that jump into something that is very unknown, which is entrepreneurship or building a business from scratch it's a big leap of faith. Um,
Absolutely.
but I'm glad that you have done it because obviously a lot of people are out there that are in very similar boat as you were and find a need for the services that you guys are offering. Um,
Thank
and that
you.
being said, are there any, I know you guys aren't necessarily directly involved with the job placement part of it,
Mhm.
but um, I guess my question is now around from the corporate side of things or from employers and an employer's perspective, right? If you're to talk to a world of employers out there, why should they be thinking about educators as their next hire, um, even with the lack of experience, perhaps? And what do for those that maybe like aren't as common hiring, the educators that you mentioned, what are some things that you could say that might open up their mind to the idea of it?
So I first want to say that my inbox is always open for corporate professionals who don't understand the value of hiring a teacher, because as someone who's kind of been on both sides now and sees the adversity that many of these clients or educators face, I think that there's a lot of education that needs to take place, especially from the corporate side, because at the end of the day, a teacher is not just standing up there and reading curriculum all day. Many days they're wearing 11 different hats. They're managing parents, they're managing district professionals, they are writing their own curriculum or writing addendums to curriculum. They are writing grants. They are doing a wide variety of things other than teaching. And I think that we are at a place culturally where teachers are no longer valued. And the work that teachers do is not looked at as professional. It's looked at as babysitting.
Mm.
And I think that as a society and not just corporations, we kind of really need to look at what a teacher actually does, because they're really not just standing up there and teaching. They're doing so much more.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think a lot of things that you mentioned too does definitely carry over to some of the area of expertise that you had brought up earlier, like project management and things like that. I also think like, I mean, HR would be a good space for people
Yes.
and educators to
Yeah, I
go
have
in.
a lot of teachers interested in HR,
Mm,
recruiting, onboarding, things like that. Yeah.
interesting. Um, on that note, I know we're rounding up on time. I just kind of like would love to get your last final thoughts around, where do you see this space changing? Obviously, you guys are still fairly a young company, but seeing quite a bit of demand there. But where do you see this space changing, evolving? What are you hoping this business becomes, in the next 2 to 3 years?
Gosh, in the next 2 to 3 years, I really hope we can partner with organizations, like corporate organizations, to do some type of education on their end to understand the values of hiring. I would love to do public speaking. I would love to partner with organizations like yourself and do social media campaigns about the value of hiring a teacher. I mean, I have so many ideas that um, I think even Chris, our CEO, would say like, all right, we need to prioritize here. But I really think kind of the sky's the limit, because we are at a very critical point in education where educators are a very highly educated, well-trained workforce. And they're seeing the value of their work outside of education as well. So I think in the next few years, we're going to see the entire education industry change, and when the education industry change, it will affect other corporate organizations, whether people are ready for that or not.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's something with a lot of the technology that's out there now, we don't even know how it's going to impact the education space, let alone the human capital that's incorporated into it right now, and how that will change the landscape of things. So, um, thank you so much for taking the time. This is a
Of
very
course.
interesting conversation, and I really appreciate you, yeah, carving out and educating us and myself around just this space and why educators make good employees.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you.